Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. In the last hour, President Trump has telephoned in to the hearings that are taking place in Pennsylvania. We want to take you to those comments from the President of the United States. We will be following the hearings live across this show in this hour, so stick around, stay tuned. Let's hear what the President of the United States had to say a moment ago.
We have one additional witness.
Commentator.
Please.
All right. I will introduce to you now, Mr. President, you are connected.
Networks, but I really appreciate being asked to speak, and I'm in the Oval Office right now, and it's very interesting to see what's going on. And this was an election that we won easily. We won it by a lot. A big energy official was on this morning on a important show and said there's no way Trump didn't win Pennsylvania because the energy industry was all for him. I saw, with my eyes what happened, and he told me horror stories, absolute horror stories. So this was very sad to say it. This election was rigged, and we can't let that happen. We can't let it happen for our country. And this election has to be turned around because we won Pennsylvania by a lot, and we won all of these swing states by a lot. Anybody watching television the night of the election was saying, wow, I was called by the biggest political people. Congratulations, sir, on a big win. And all of a sudden, ballots were dumped all over the place, and a lot of horrible things happened. And everybody in that room, I want to thank all of the people that signed affidavits and all of the speakers. You're fantastic people. You're great patriots. I want to thank the senators for being there. And it's so important. Day before Thanksgiving, it really represents somebody. Between the voter suppression and all of the horrible things that happened to poll watchers, we have poll watcher affidavits piled up to the ceiling. They're all over. They were treated horribly all over this, all of these swing states. I mean, virtually all of the swing states. And many other things were happening that were horrible, just horrible. But the poll watchers weren't allowed to watch. They were, in many cases, whisked out of the room, not only into pens that were 20, 30, 40, 60, 100 feet away, where you couldn't even see. They were using binoculars. People are reporting that they had to use binoculars, and that didn't work. If you were a Republican poll watcher, you were treated like a dog. And the Democrats had no problem, but they were rough. They were literally pushed out, and it was rough tactics. This is what happened here. This is not the United States of America, what happened, and I think everybody knows that. That's why you're there, and that's why you're so vehement about it. We have many cases of people walking in. A woman, an elderly woman, walks in looking forward to voting November 3rd and says, oh, good, where would I go about voting? I'm sorry, you've already voted. Your ballot is in. I said, no, I didn't vote. No, your ballot is in. You've already voted. In all cases for Biden, by the way. She said, no, I want to vote. Nope, your ballot is in. And then they give her a provisional ballot to sign, which goes nowhere. It's a disgrace that this is happening to our country. We won this election by a lot. We got 74 million votes. And if you would have said 74 million votes the day before the election, every single professional in the business would have said there's no way of beating that. We got 11 million votes more than we had 4 years before in 2016. And we got many votes more than Ronald Reagan had when he won 49 states. And nobody would have said we even had a chance of losing. And all you had to do is take a look at the numbers at 10 o'clock in the evening when everybody thought the election was virtually over. And then very weird things happened, but they're not weird to professionals, and they're not weird to Dominion and other people that operate machines, and they're not weird to the people that handle the ballots where they were flooding the market. People were getting 2 and 3 and 4 ballots in their home. People that were dead were signing up for ballots. Not only were they coming in and putting in a ballot, but dead people were requesting ballots, and they were dead for years, and they were requesting ballots. And the whole world is watching us. The whole world is watching the United States of America, and we can't let them get away with it. And we have judges that are afraid to make a decision. We have judges that don't want to do the same thing. Well, a very good lawyer said, well, sir, I mean, that's a big statement for a judge to overthrow an election. I said, really? If he got hundreds of thousands of votes more than he was entitled to get through all of the things that I'm listening to right now, and you're just covering a few of them, we have hundreds and hundreds of affidavits of stories that are even worse than the stories I'm hearing. Why wouldn't they overturn an election? Certainly overturn it in your state, because we have other states that are just as bad. If you look at Michigan with Detroit, you look at the things that happened in Detroit, where you have a voter, but you have more votes than you have voters. You take a look at Detroit, Michigan. You have more votes than you have voters. And then you have 2 people that don't want to certify. They don't want to certify, and they're harassed violently, and they turned off the cameras during the harassment for 2 hours. And then they said, wow, and they were afraid, and they voted, and then they went back to sign, and they couldn't do it because they said, we can't do it because this is corrupt. This is horrible what's taking place. Think of it, more votes than you have voters. But that was the least of it. They have things that were as bad as that. And this is going on all over. We're doing very well in a lot of states. A lot of good things are happening in
All right,
Georgia.
we're going to stick with the President of the United States remarks. We'll have more when we come back here on Real America's Voice. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the National Pulse, live here on Real America's Voice. I want to make sure we take you straight back to the hearings in Pennsylvania. If we don't get to talk, by the way, during the rest of this show, I want to wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. Let's go back now to Pennsylvania.
Happening in Georgia, we're getting little help from government, but a lot of good things are happening in Georgia, Wisconsin, and Michigan. They're seeing what happened in Detroit. And we sure are looking at what's happening in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. What happened in Philadelphia, they keep the poll watchers not only in pens, but they keep them out of the building. And the only reason they got back into the building was they got a court order. And then the definition of back into the building was very far away where they couldn't see anything. And they talk about closed circuit television, except you couldn't see it because the picture was so unclear you didn't even know what they were doing. They could have been playing a baseball game. So it's a very sad thing for our country to have this. And they have to turn over the results. It would be easy for me to say, oh, let's worry about 4 years from now. No, this election was lost by the Democrats. They cheated. It was a fraudulent election. They flooded the market. They defrauded everybody with ballots. And I just want to thank everybody for being there. You're doing a tremendous service. This is a very important moment in the history of our country. And you're doing a tremendous service to our country. And don't worry about bravery, because the people that talk the most, they're not the ones you have to worry about. And these are all talkers. They intimidate. But these are not people that you're going to ultimately have to. They push you around. They push our poll workers out. Our poll watchers were pushed out of the building. Okay, some got back in, they were put in the pens. But these are not people, don't be intimidated by these people. But they're bad people. They're horrible people. And they're people that don't love our country. So we don't have to worry about 4 years right now. We have to worry what happened on November 3rd and previous to November 3rd. And by the way, after November 3rd, when people put votes in and they put them in illegally, they put them in after the polls closed. And one of our great Supreme Court justices made mention of that. And I can't imagine that any justice or anybody looking at it could be thrilled when they vote after the election is over. So I want to thank everybody very much for being there. I want to thank the state Senate, respected people, tremendous people, and you're doing a tremendous service for our country. And if something was done wrong, if this election was won fraudulently, and that's what happened, it was a fraud. And we're talking about, very importantly, many more ballots, many more votes than the number we need. In other words, if we needed 50,000 votes, we're not talking about we found 9 dead people that voted. Of course, there were many more than that, many numbers that nobody even believes. No, we're talking about numbers that are far in excess of the 50,000, far in excess of another state where we lost by 10,000. And they went absolutely wild because we got far more votes than they thought possible. And they've just stepped on the gas, and they got caught. Just like they got caught spying on my campaign, they got caught doing this. So I really appreciate it, and the country appreciates it, and we have to turn the election over because there's no doubt we have all the evidence, we have all the affidavits, we have everything. All we need is to have some judge listen to it properly without having a political opinion or having another kind of a problem, because we have everything. And by the way, the evidence is pouring in now as we speak. And I want to thank Rudy Giuliani for having the courage to do this. There are other lawyers that backed down because they were being screamed at. Rudy is the greatest mayor in the history of New York, and there's a reason. He's got great courage, and he doesn't care. He wants to do what's right. And I told him the other day, Rudy, you were the greatest mayor in the history of New York, and you see what happened to New York without Rudy. You were the greatest mayor, but this is more important. What you're doing now is far more important than being a great mayor of the city of New York and being its greatest mayor by far. By the way, by far. This is going to be your crowning achievement because you're saving our country. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Well, incredible scenes there in Pennsylvania today. We're going to be keeping up with the coverage here on the National Pulse, but I just wanted to recap. We've heard some incredibly compelling testimonies out of Pennsylvania, and if the testimonies cease in this hour, we'll recap and bring you some of the ones we heard from earlier today. We also have the best political commentators, analysts, legal minds on standby. But I know you all want to watch what's going on in Pennsylvania. So thank you to the President of the United States for giving us an update via the telephone. He wasn't able to make it as a result of the coronavirus and the Boris Epstein catching that and having been in contact with Rudy Giuliani. So they kept the president away from going in person. But he phoned in and he had a lot to say, as you heard just there. Now I want to take you back to Pennsylvania. Let's continue.
I think what you've just heard guarantees that 100 years from now, that this is the most important public hearing ever held by this Senate committee. We turn now for our questions. Representative Ryan.
First of all, thank you very much, Mayor, for being here and for all the testifiers. 16 years ago this week, I was called out of retirement and recalled active duty to go to Iraq to do the elections in Iraq in January 30th, 2005. That was an extraordinarily secure election. As a former commanding officer of a civil affairs group and psychological operations command, I know how to do elections. And what happened in Pennsylvania from a process control perspective was absolutely a travesty.
All right, so folks, there was a lot to really take in, all right?
All right, there is indeed a lot to take in, as you hear there on the YouTube live stream. We'll get back to what's happening in Pennsylvania in just a moment. Want to make sure that you guys are all following along. You can follow on the Pluto website, on your Roku devices, on your Apple televisions, on americasvoice.news, on the nationalpulse.com/TV. And we're very appreciative to all of you. A lot of the information that's coming out today is the information that Rudy Giuliani and the legal team wanted to present before judges. A lot of judges, as you know, would refuse to hear the evidence behind the case for fraud in Pennsylvania. And so they're having the hearing almost amongst themselves for the Pennsylvania Senate. They're putting all the witnesses forward. We'll be back with more. Stick around. You don't want to miss it. Welcome back. Here on Real America's Voice, we're going to take you back to the coverage from Pennsylvania, the hearings, incredible witness testimonies. Let's roll it.
To submit.
Thank you.
Need to submit our vote. And so I would say in terms of a remedy, you may fashion that even outside the purview of the litigation that we are now bringing. And I'm happy to go into that into more detail if the panel would prefer.
Thank you. Representative Kaufman.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here, and Attorney Ellis. We appreciate your service to the nation because these are definitely difficult times, and all of those who have testified, it truly does take bravery to step out in situations like this and talk about your personal experience. I wanted to direct this to Mayor Giuliani and Attorney Ellis. In the cured ballot issue, or uncured ballot issue, the ability to cure in one area of the state and not in others, that is certainly, to many of us, seems to be an equal protection violation under the 14th Amendment. Can you quantify what you found as far as maybe number or information as far as the number of ballots we're talking, and how widespread it is across the Commonwealth as far as, were there 2 counties that allowed for curing, and, they were Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, or were there more counties out there that allowed for curing? That kind of information would be very helpful to us, I think.
There's no question, Representative, that it went on, and it went on in the 2 counties you mentioned, and probably 3 or 4 more, curing, in other words. It did not go on in the majority of counties, Republican or Democrat. Most of them were in a quandary. The Elections Commissioner sent out a notice, advice that you could cure the ballot. If you check with your lawyer would say, no, you can't do that. The legislature has to provide for a cured ballot. So your counties that were sticking to the strict letter of the law didn't provide for curing. The counties that were acting, I would say, illegally, because the election commissioner doesn't have the authority to make that change, followed it. It does turn out that those are largely the Biden counties did the curing and the Trump counties didn't do the curing. It's hard to know how many it affected. I could get you the number of actually cured ballots, but I don't think I can get you to the number that weren't cured. Okay. Who are the ones that were effective? When we argued this in front of the court, the judge said, well, maybe those people in the counties that didn't allow curing should sue that county. But that county didn't do anything wrong. That county followed the law. The reason they were deprived of their right to vote on an equal basis is because other counties followed what would be the illegal advice of the election commissioner, that you can cure a ballot for which there is no authority in state law. So we will try to do better to get a good number there, but it's hard to do because a lot of it affected people who just didn't vote.
Sure.
But I do think the practice, in some cases, the numbers are sufficient to overturn the election. In some cases, the numbers aren't. But what they do is show how onerous and how draconian the measures were they took to flip this election. I mean, some of them result in numbers that affect the outcome of the election, like not examining the ballots. Some of them don't. But there's still indications that this was a deliberate fraud. This wasn't just a couple of election officials kind of screwed up. This was a deliberate, planned fraud, and that's why the remedy, which seems kind of tough, is justified. If this were just a couple of mistakes, that would be a tough remedy. But this is a plan that was carried out throughout your entire state, and I submit it was carried out in concert with other Democrat organizations. And if you look carefully, they picked only Democrat cities where they control law enforcement and the courts, and they can get ridiculous decisions, like the first the decision they got from a judge in Philadelphia who said, "Oh, you're present. Why do you have to see anything?" Well, because I'm an inspector. That's why. That's a purely political hack decision. And they knew they could get decisions like that in Philadelphia, in Detroit, if it were a different kind of election, Chicago, New York. Those are the kinds of cities they picked. They didn't pick, even in your state, kind of neutral cities, Democrat or Republican.
Thank you. Representative Schemmel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Three quick questions for three different testifiers. So we certainly know about the irregularities and inconsistencies. You just detailed an inconsistency, and you can't prove a negative. That's why you can never prove votes that were never allowed to be cured. But in regard to allegations of fraud, I have a question first, and forgive me, I don't remember names, but the gentleman here from Philadelphia who was denied admittance to observe in a poll. You described being denied the ability to get into a polling place. Did you seek to be admitted to any other polling places and were also denied?
I could have gone to other polling places where I heard there was problems, but we decided to move on to other problems. What was her name? I was actually at her polling place that when she was being totally harassed. I was one of about 5-6 guys to stop the harassment.
So there was no polling place that you sought admission to in and around the city of Philadelphia that just allowed you in when you displayed your orange card?
I probably could have gone to that entire ward and had the same problem. We went out of that ward because there was other problems going on that day.
Okay. Next question for a gentleman next to you, from the attorney from Florida. You were observing polls and the processes in the city of Pittsburgh. I believe that you described being kept away from being able to observe the tabulators and so forth. That was a problem we certainly saw in other places in the city of Philadelphia. When you were eventually allowed to get closer, where perhaps you could see the ballots and the votes, did you observe anything different about the behavior of the tabulators? Did their behavior change? Did their methodologies change? Anything to lead you to think that they were conducting the process one way when you weren't observing, and a different way when you were?
In the first instance, we were never really able to get, there was only one time.
All right, we have to go to a quick break. When we come back, Molly McCann will join us, help unpack some of this stuff, and then we'll take you right back to the hearing. Stay tuned. Okay, welcome back to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. I've still got the audio in my ear. Production, if we can just lower the audio there for a second so I can hear myself think. Some very interesting points being made today, incredible witness testimonies that should have been in front of judges, quite frankly, but don't take my word for it. I'm not a lawyer. I don't even play one on TV. Molly McCann's here to help us unpack this off council with Sidney Powell. Molly, thank you for taking the time out today. And sorry about keeping you on hold, but I thought the audience wants to hear what's going on in that hearing, and I think it's just some very compelling viewing. Is the media going to start shutting up about the fact that there's no evidence out there now? What's your take?
I think that's unlikely, although as more and more evidence comes out, it becomes hard to ignore it. I think this hearing holds a twofold purpose. First, it gets the evidence out to the American people so we can start thinking about it, getting outraged over it, discussing it amongst ourselves. So it's good it's happening right before Thanksgiving. It also helps the court see the mood of the country swinging. And then, of course, secondarily, though, it kind of primes the legislature, because the legislature may have to take this issue up and send electors themselves to Congress. So I think that this week we are really seeing, I hope, it's very early, but I think we're seeing a swing in the Trump direction here. This is an excellent development to have this evidence out there and start to shift the mood of the country.
I think you're right, I agree, and there's a lot more, I think, of substance than many people were thinking about. Frankly, I'm getting tired from hearing from the people who pretended they were MAGA for many years, who are now on social media saying, give up, it's time to concede, throw in the towel. Look, you just listen, just wait and listen to the testimonies that we're hearing today, and I just don't see how on earth people think that we should just give up on all of this stuff, just give up on the Constitution, on the Republic, on the rule of law in this country. Take us around the horn real quick of what you've been looking at in the last 24 hours, where you're seeing developments and where your focus is, Molly.
Well, my focus, first of all, things are obviously going well in Pennsylvania. Today, a judge enjoined any further progression of the certification. As you know, Pennsylvania is certified, but there are more steps to perfect that certification. She has enjoined that pending an evidentiary hearing. So we're going to see more progress in Pennsylvania. But in other states, there have also been suits that have been dropping. In Wisconsin, the recount is progressing, and it's progressing well. Well, I've heard it's progressing well, and we have private suits as well that are happening. In Michigan, the Great Lakes Justice Center, as you know, everyone was a little depressed the other day that they had been denied. But when you actually read the opinion, their request for an injunction of certification was not as negative as it appeared, and the court specifically discussed how concerning the evidence that they had seen of fraud within the pleadings, how concerning that was to them. That's a wonderful, wonderful signal both to the legislature and the nation. The Supreme Court of Michigan is deeply disturbed by the allegations of fraud. So in all of these different states, we're seeing legal movement and action and responses from the court that I think are more positive than the media would lead you to believe. And Raheem, really quickly, if I could note, as you said, some people are kind of giving up here. And there is plenty of time there's plenty of time, frankly, for us to fix this election. I was just reading today that in the 1960 election, Hawaii actually certified the vote for President Nixon. And the governor signed it, and they sent that off. And then a recount took place. And it wasn't until December 28th, I believe, that the recount was finished. And so they certified all over again for Kennedy and sent that to Congress. And Congress accepted the second certification for Kennedy. So, Ronald Reagan has a great quote about there's no more powerful weapon in the arsenal of the world than the courage and will of free men and women. And I think that we have to keep that firmly in our sights right now. We do not have to give up on this. We don't have to give up on our nation. We have plenty of time. I mean, obviously the clock is ticking, but we do have time, and we always have options.
Molly McCann, thank you so much for the update here this afternoon. We'll come back to you if we get the chance later on in this hour as well. I want to take the audience back to Pennsylvania. Make sure you're following mollymccann.com and at mollmccann on social media. I gave people a big shout out yesterday as well, and I saw a lot of you answer to that and actually started following a lot of these people who sometimes appear in the background, as Molly's appearing more and more in the foreground and front of stage lately, but other people who are working really hard over the last couple of weeks and continue to do so in months, continue to do so, and not the people who are giving up, not the people who want to throw in the towel, not the people saying to you, this isn't worth the fight. This isn't, we just got to move on. Let's get Nikki Haley lined up as the next thing. Nah, we're not doing that here. Can we throw back? I'm just going to ask production. Can we throw back to the thing? Okay, let's go right back to Pennsylvania. Better them than me.
Democratic election day voters, and interestingly enough, apparently Republicans who vote by mail are much more likely to vote for the down ballot candidate than on election day. Last comment there. Part of the argument is that people didn't vote down ballot. That's going to be a lot more prevalent on election day when you've waited in line for 2 hours and you're in a hurry to get out there. But this speaks to the opposite. With a mail-in ballot, you have plenty of time to complete your ballot and to go down ballot. So if that was the case, the opposite should be true if you're tracking with me. So I guess my question there is on, do we think the mail-in is more susceptible? And then lastly, maybe for you, Mr. Chairman, or whoever has a little more clout here than I do, it is imperative that we secure the Sure system data. And some of the things that we are questioning can be easily proven or disproven. We just want the facts. So for example, if we see huge numbers of inactive voters, I think one of the witnesses spoke to that. Did we see huge numbers of inactive voters on the mail-in side? That's all right there in the data. We know how frequently people voted. We know who requested mail-in ballots. Did we see multiple mail-in ballots going to the same address? It is mind-boggling the record turnout that we saw in a state where mail-in voting is brand new during a time of COVID, where the ground game was certainly hindered by that. Doesn't mean it didn't happen, but we have the data. This is a simple query of data. This is not a manual recount of ballots. This is a simple query of data that the state possesses, specifically to say, did significant numbers of mail-in ballots go to the same address? I could do that myself in probably 10 minutes if I had the data. And do we see large numbers of inactive voters coming out for a candidate who had very little enthusiasm? And maybe it all happened, but we don't have to speculate. The data is there, and I would suggest we have a look at that. So I apologize. Thank you for humoring me with that. It's just a topic we hadn't touched on very much. I wanted to throw some examples out, and I am curious if you feel the mail-in is more susceptible or less susceptible than the in-person voting.
Representative Jones, the user's manual.
Straight back to Pennsylvania, to the hearings. Let's roll.
Is there one or two things that you would advise us or suggest to us that we really concentrate on and or make a change? What comes to mind that would be most important for us to really do here in Pennsylvania?
Well, first thing, of course, as a lawyer for my client, along with Jenna, we would ask you not to certify, and to certify the correct, honest votes, which I think can be arrived at several different ways. And probably the easiest way to arrive at it, just because of the huge number of votes, are the votes that were not properly inspected. And when I say properly inspected, they weren't inspected at all. You could almost consider them hidden votes counted in a back room where everybody was smoking cigars. And the reason you have a lot of votes without a down ballot, you're quite correct, Representative Jones, that it's much easier to fill out your home, you can fill out the down ballot, than rushing through a machine. However, if you only have a half hour to get 10,000 votes in, you don't have time to do the down ballot, do you? If you're sitting in a truck somewhere right near the place you're going to bring in shopping bags, and I don't think we have this evidence here, but we have this evidence in Michigan. We have evidence of trucks coming in with ballots in garbage pails and ballots in cardboard boxes. So maybe it's my prosecutor's paranoia, but it seems to me that those ballots were filled out that night. And you don't have time to vote for all those. You just got enough time to go. And that's why you get this strange anomaly that there are so many down ballots not filled out for Biden.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, sir.
I learned as a lieutenant never to bring a problem to my superiors without a solution. That's one of the things I try to live to today. There are solutions that are available. I've made the simple comment that your vote should be at least as secure as your Venmo account, and it's not. It's easily fixable with blockchain. There is a process out there that was developed by MIT. It's called Votes, V-O-A-T-Z. It's being fielded now. The problem is there are no national standards for federal elections, and there are no enforceable standards. So if nothing else out of this election, if we have a set of enforceable standards and we use technology like blockchain to ensure that every vote going through the whole process is transparent from soup to nuts, then we can ensure a technologically advanced, secure election that's not an individual vote may be manipulable, but batches of votes would not be. So,
Great information. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Can I add one thing
Sure.
as well for the mayor? So you asked what two things? Well, I think those two things are very clear, that you have to deal with today and then you have to deal with the future. And the more pressing instance right now is today, and this body should deal with that in some way. And you are the constitutionally vested entity to do that. You have a variety of options in front of you. And when you deliberate together how to best address that, you have the constitutional authority and permission to do it. And so the mayor has suggested one possible remedy. There are others, and you could call for a special election. Still, you can direct the manner of your electors. You have a variety of constitutional options, but one option should not be to ignore it and to certify a corrupted, irredeemably compromised election. So we would ask that you deal with that today, and then for the future, look at all of these things that you've raised. Look at all of the voting machines. Look at all of these people who are interfering. Really, you have an executive office and branch that is runaway. You have, from your governor to your secretary of state to each of these individual election officers. This is election official fraud, and that's what's going on here. And for the sake of every future election, that should be addressed in the legislature, because you also have the constitutionally vested obligation to the people of the state to address that. So my recommendation, along with the mayor, and I sincerely applaud everything that he has said as well, and on behalf of our client, but on behalf of the nation. You're right when you say that this isn't just about overturning an election. It's not about deriving the outcome. That's what the fraudsters want to do. What we want to make sure of is that we, the people, get to select and prefer our commander-in-chief, and you have the obligation and the responsibility to ensure for the people of Pennsylvania that
Thank you.
occurs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I believe we have Representative Metcalf on Zoom with one final question. Daryl?
Can you hear me, Senator Argyle?
Loud and clear.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Senator Argyle, Senator Mastriano, for hosting this very important hearing. It's very important to the future of our republic today. Thank you for the invitation to the House members that are joining you there today. Thank you for the invitation for me to join you via Zoom today. And thank you for the opportunity to provide some input and ask a question of Mayor Giuliani here today. But a lot of what's been talked about, and I really appreciate Mayor Giuliani and the attorney's initiative to the General Assembly to reassert our constitutional authority regarding the certification of this election. I am former state government committee chair that had oversight for the election law for many years. I served in that position not during the last term, but in the past, and we have battled in Pennsylvania to fight the fraud and fight the way that our election laws have been violated, not just for several cycles, but for decades. And we've actually had a state Senate race that was overturned, I believe, in the Philadelphia area back in the 90s because of fraud. So when we look at what has occurred here, and I really appreciate Mayor Giuliani bringing all of those individuals before us today to provide testimony at this hearing. And I think even more important, I hope that we get a chance to see that their testimony was heard in a court of law where a just ruling is found to protect every legal vote that was cast here in this election in November, and to discard all those votes that were not legally cast. And I think as we've been overwhelmed, as was mentioned by the senators at the beginning of this meeting, that as we
Well, I hope you're all as excited as I am to see what the left's reaction to all of this is over the next 24 hours. I find it very compelling. We'll be back with more of it. Welcome back to the National Pulse. Matt Palumbo, the content manager over at the Bongino Report, joins us in this segment here. He's the author of a new book, Dumb and Dumber, How Cuomo and de Blasio Ruined New York. We'll bring him in just a second. But I want to play, production, can we play the clip from earlier on today, that quick 2-minute clip? I just want to make sure that the audience hears this, sees this, and I want to get Matt Palumbo's reaction to this as well. I think it was one of the most compelling moments from the Pennsylvania hearings from earlier on today. Let's roll that if we can do it, please.
When they said, well, we've got all the forensic records and so forth. We just learned 2 days ago that virtually all chain of custody logs, records, yellow sheets, everything was gone. All forensic evidence, all custody sheets in Delaware County are gone. They had a signing party where they sat down and poll workers were invited back to recreate those logs. And our understanding as of today was that they were unsuccessful in getting them all. So we have a situation where we have 100,000 ballots to 120,000 ballots, both mail-in and USB, they're in question. Now, there's no cure for this. There's no remedy for this. As a home charter, we could have a re-election in Delaware County for our own representatives within our own town, but there is no cure for that for the President of the United States. And I don't believe, as a citizen and an observer to this, that anybody could certify that vote in any good conscience. And if the Democrats that have a part of this process had done things, followed their own procedures, which they created almost unilaterally, we would be in a situation where they could exonerate themselves and they could say, Mr. Stenstrom, you've been misinformed. We have evidence here that refutes what you say. But that's not the case. They can't do that. So I say, if you can't certify that vote, and you can't certify 100,000 votes out of 300,000, then you can't certify Delaware County.
Pretty big stuff there. Matt Palumbo is the author of Dumb and Dumber. I want everybody out there to pre-order this book. It's amazing. It's both hilarious and incredibly detailed about what happened and what has happened to the once, I suppose, some Americans thought of it as a great city of New York. As a Londoner, I didn't necessarily feel that way. Matt, thanks for joining us here. What we just heard, just before we get to the book and what's in the book, what we've heard today is evidence that should have been before judges, that should have been before the courts. And yet it hasn't been. We've had to have this kind of side hearing at the Wyndham Hotel. This makes America's democracy, its democratic system, which is supposed to undergird the actual constitutional republic, it makes it a laughing stock on an international stage. People are looking at this and going, wow, even the courts are messed up. They won't hear the evidence. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are asking, and obviously we've seen some pretty damning things out of the hearing, and a lot of people are asking, well, why did it take us 2 or 3 weeks to get all this evidence? And I mean, I think the obvious answer is that's how long it takes to gather the testimony and look for the irregularities and prove it. I think the biggest one, and I've just been sort of getting the highlights on Twitter as I've been writing all day, was there was a vote done, but I can't remember if it was 300,000 or 600,000 for Biden, and then maybe like 6,000 for Trump. That seems like a smoking gun to me, but of course, we'll see how it plays out in court if it goes that route.
Now, Matt, they say the camera adds 10 pounds. My advice to you
is pizza, Raheem.
Stop eating cameras.
Well, the reason I missed the beginning was because I was responsible and I was at the gym after months of you hounding me about my excessive pizza intake. So,
Matt could eat pizza in the Olympics for the United States team and win the gold.
We'd win.
Oh, breaking news. I'm getting breaking news here in this moment. I'm getting that the president has just pardoned Michael Flynn, General Flynn, which is I believe that to be breaking news. We'll be double checking on that, but I think we can report that live here right now. Matt, just while I confirm all of that, we've got 3 minutes here. Let's get the book up. Tell us about your book, Dumb and Dumber. When is it out? What does it contain? I hear there's a great blurb by this British guy, genius. Go ahead.
Yeah, he has the same name as you. It's a very odd coincidence. What made me write the book was actually a combination of factors. One of the things I've enjoyed reading and writing about over the years has been this exodus from blue states to red states. And New York has been one of, the biggest states losing people. And is the number one destination state is Florida. So like in the book, I have a comparison between New York and Florida, for that obvious reason. And to show how radically different the government's role in daily life is, the efficiency of government, the infrastructure and education systems, and it makes a pretty convincing case. Well, if Florida represents your typical red state and New York's your typical blue state, why would anyone want to live in a blue state? And you could do the same analysis with Illinois or California, but obviously we're mocking Dumb and Dumber over here. The second reason is I really was disgusted by the media fawning over Cuomo. In the beginning, when coronavirus hit, all I heard was this guy was the guy who kind of figured it out, and before I looked into the numbers, thought that must be the case, and a 5-minute search into the coronavirus fatality rate disproves that. Right. And the nursing home scandal is probably his biggest failure, where his idea was, just because hospitals might run out of space, we'll mix coronavirus patients with nursing home patients to free up space. That killed upwards of 11,000 people. The official estimate is 6,000, but it's probably much higher. And some people that have criticized me saying I'm Monday morning quarterbacking, and hindsight's 2020. But if you were to stop an average person on the street and say, should we mix coronavirus patients with
Matt, we
the
said
people
it at the
most
time.
susceptible to death?
We said it right at the beginning of this whole thing, that it was going to be a disaster, and of course it was a disaster. Matt, we've got to bounce here. I'm sorry, because we've got this breaking news to cover. I know you've got to go cover it at the Bongino Report as well. General Flynn being pardoned. Matt Palumbo, author of Dumb and Dumber. Make sure you're checking out the book. We'll have him back very soon to talk about it. He's actually given us at the National Pulse an excerpt of the book. It's up on thenationalpulse.com right now, so you can go ahead and look at it. Matt Palumbo, thanks again. And stop eating cameras. All right, we're going to get Matt Palumbo off the comorbidity and back into full health. All right, the breaking news, just the news. Our news division here at Real America's Voice is reporting in this hour breaking news that President Trump has pardoned former National Security Advisor General Mike Flynn. We had heard the rumor of that in the last couple of days. That appears to now be the case. President Trump on Wednesday pardoning his former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, bringing an end to a tumultuous 4-year criminal case that felled the 3-star general before prosecutors admitted that they had wrongly pursued his case. We'll be back with more National Pulse for you on Friday. In the meantime, stick around. David Brody up next. Have a very happy Thanksgiving.